My name is Eleanor Northaft. My husband was in the union, Local 282. As I'm getting older, I'd like somebody to fight for me. So I called up Retiree First.
Hi.
And I got Brooke.
So nice to meet you. I'm Brooke. I'm an advocate at Retiree First. I've been working with Eleanor for 3 years. She was one of my first calls. I helped her with transportation to her doctors, getting her glasses reimbursed.
Oh, they are pretty fancy.
I'm basically just answering any questions she has.
And I always have a lot of questions.
Not too many.
I have a friend there. I love it because I can depend on her to help me out in any situation.
Oh, I'm excited.
She always comes through for me.
Do you stream on a Roku, a Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app. Watch Action News live.
And the big story on Action News.
Plus special programming, breaking news, and severe weather updates.
Tremendous amounts of rain.
Always on, always the news team you trust. Watch 6ABC 24/7 on your streaming device. Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
And welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey. We thank everybody for tuning in here across the Jacob Media Network. If you're consuming today's show via YouTube, enjoy the full hour. If you're listening on one of the many terrestrial radio stations where we broadcast the Labor and Energy Show, we do thank you for being out there and for listening to the show. And a reminder, if you miss any of today's show, or you can do what a lot of other people do, download the podcast of this program on Apple or Spotify. Just search the Labor and Energy Show. JDoc, a good morning to you, sir. How are you?
I'm great, Joe. It's couldn't be more excited about this show. You and I talk about common sense and energy a lot on this broadcast, and educating the public and our political leaders. We have two phenomenal guests. Rich-Nolan, who's the president and CEO of the National Mining Association, and Katie-Sweeney, who's the executive vice president and chief operating officer of the National Mining Association. And so, Joe, mining in the U.S. has taken a lot of heat, often with reckless abandon and completely unwarranted. And so on today's show, we have two individuals that are going to educate our listeners on the facts and the realities of mining in America, whether it's coal or minerals. These are the things that you will not hear on mainstream media news. One of the amazing things about this, the individuals, the members of the National Mining Association, they mine the coal and the minerals that provide the foundation for our way of life. And so we're going to learn a lot today. We've got two great people, and this show is something people don't want to miss.
Yeah, good stuff. Good lead in, JDoc, and so true on today's conversation with our two very, very special guests. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. There's a lot of misinformation. And there's a lot of bad perception, I think, that and I'm not being disrespectful to any of our listeners or anybody in general, I think there's just a lot of misperception. We create perception of reality, and sometimes what we create isn't accurate.
Well, a large portion of the way we live, the foundation of our lives, how we heat our homes, how we live our lives, depends on the resources that their members provide to us every day. And the facts, the true facts and the realities, are rarely talked about. And so that's why we created this platform, Joe, to be able to give reality a platform, a voice. And so it doesn't get any better or realer than this.
Great stuff. It's the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey. We'll take a short commercial break. JDoc will jump in on the other side for our special show today. Back in a moment.
Welcome to Pond Lehocky, the largest workers' compensation law firm in Pennsylvania. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured and disabled workers obtain benefits. as well as some of the biggest settlements in the state. Even better, Pond Lehocky doesn't charge a dime until you win. If you've been injured at work, give Pond Lehocky a call.
The best way to describe Anthony, David, and Jan are that they're my brothers. I met Anthony at LA Fitness because I noticed that he had a Teamster's bag and his dad was a Teamster leader.
I'm a third-generation son of labor. My grandmother worked in a factory. My mother and father were both Teamster members. I don't think there's a trade that I don't have a family member in.
What's so big for me coming from a union background is what affects one member affects the entire membership.
A lot of people can relate to the issues that individuals deal with. We pride ourselves on empathy.
The big value that's always instilled in you if you grow up in a union household is the importance of brotherhood. People that lean on each other, that rely on each other.
When we were building this business, having that background and knowing what matters most to the union members is really what we use to drive and build out Retiree First.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey on the Jacob Media Network. I'm ecstatic to bring into the program our guest, Rich-Nolan, President, CEO, National Mining Association. How are you, Rich?
Good morning, Joe. Thanks for having us.
It's our pleasure. And Katie-Sweeney, Executive Vice President, COO, National Mining Association. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.
So it is absolutely our pleasure. And, you know, as we said, we're going to be educating our listeners and the general public and our policymakers on this show of the realities, okay, and the facts about, you know, our mining industry, the things that people don't hear on a daily basis. Fact, the U.S. is the home to plentiful. We have so many natural resources, both minerals and coal. We know they can be mined responsibly in accordance with the world's highest labor and environmental standards while creating incredibly high-paying American jobs. Okay, the message on today's show, okay, is that mining here in the U.S. is good for our economy. It's good for local communities that are the homes of the mines, and it's good for our manufacturing sector, which can source the minerals that they need virtually for every product right here at home throughout the entire supply chain. So whether you're talking about manufacturing or energy, there are so many who say made in America should also be mined in America. And so having said that, and I agree with every one of those sentiments, Rich, if you will, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your background.
Thanks, Joe. Absolutely. You just hit the nail on the head talking about the minerals demand and the coal demand that we're in. We're really in the most mineral and mining intensive times in our history, probably since World War II. So the effort that's underway and what needs to happen is really very intense and necessary right now. My background, I've been the CEO for the National Mining Association for approximately 4.5 years now. I've been with the association for 18 years. I've worked in natural resource policy, whether it be forestry or chemicals, or now mining for most of my professional career. And it's just a pleasure to advocate on behalf of the working people of this country that are in heavy manufacturing and producing the real essential materials that this country needs to continue to be successful and drive forward and really win that competitive race with our manufacturing competitors overseas.
Absolutely. Katie-Sweeney, a little bit about yourself.
I have been with the Mining Association, Joe, for over 30 years, and I love this industry. I am so proud of what the hundreds of thousands of miners provide every day for our society. These are great paying jobs, and like you said, they really benefit those local communities. Mines are often located in more remote areas, and they can really be the driver for the economy there. just very passionate about advocating for mining. And thank you for this opportunity to really educate your listeners. I mean, you really kicked it off in a great way. We really need people to understand the connection between mining and their everyday lives and what mining brings to society.
Absolutely. So my family's from Mahanoy City in Pennsylvania. Okay, big mining area. Unfortunately, major hit there, and we know how what mining does, and to support our way of life, our everyday way of life. Okay, and and especially in our union community. Okay, so as we segue, let's talk about what the National Mining Association does, who you represent, and what are the primary issues that you're focused on? Rich?
I'll give that a shot. Our trade association represents about 280 companies involved in every stage of mining operations, whether it be producers or those that are out there exploring for new deposits, or the equipment and manufacturing providers that help us arm our workforce with the safest, most productive, most efficient machines out there. So it's a broad group. Again, we're engaged in everything from rare earth minerals to battery materials, lithium, cobalt, nickel, and then traditional store of value and high-tech materials that come from gold, silver, copper, and then we've talked about coal as well. So it's really a broad-based coalition that engages at every level in the advocacy space to advance the priorities for the industry, whether that be affordable, reliable power from thermal coal generation, or metallurgical coal, which is a high energy-based coal for steel production in this country. And then the current hot wave of battery materials and what's going into the electrification of the economy, from copper to rare earths to what's in your automobile and your cell phone. There's tremendous opportunity right there if we can get the policy correct.
And having said that, Katie, is there a disconnect? Is there a disconnect when it comes to those, especially you talk about the critical minerals, right? In regards to what people really understand. In other words, you just don't buy them off a shelf, okay? They have to be mined, okay? And it's as simple as, okay, and we've had on this broadcast, and I think we talked about Siddharth Kara, who was over in the Congo watching the video when the 11-year-olds mining by hand, okay, and it literally it kind of swept the country, the shock from that, okay, and the people really understand that connection and the importance of what your members do on a daily basis, that would provide those good paying jobs. Obviously, not under those conditions here in the U.S., but they understand that we can do that here.
I think that is part of our, continued efforts, right, is to educate the public on just that. We have a Minerals Make Life initiative. So if anybody who's listening wants to go to www.mineralsmakelife.org, you can learn about those connections in so many ways. But just, there really is a disconnect. People think, oh, we don't have those minerals here, but we sure do. We have over 6.2 trillion estimated value of minerals here in the United States.
So because we're going to get into that right now, literally. So right now, obviously, electric vehicles are a big conversation piece. We're all for them. Not real excited about EV mandates that that people have zero understanding about. Okay, let's get into that conversation. Okay, whether it is electric vehicles, solar panels, or wind turbines, or the infrastructure needed to charge and connect all of them. Okay, we know these technologies need vastly more minerals than at any other time in our history. What are we looking at in terms of some of those estimates that are out there? And I believe you were kind of addressing that, Katie. So I'll go to you first.
Yeah, I mean, so some of the estimates from mineral commodity experts around the globe, like the International Energy Agency, say we need probably about 400 new mines globally by 2035 to get all these minerals we need for everything that you were just talking about. We think some of those mines should be here in the United States, right? Because we've got the best standards, the best workers. But we have problems in the U.S. with the policies of getting those minerals out of the ground. Just takes way too long.
Well, it certainly, when you think about it, and you talk about our standards, our workforce standards, our safety standards, our environmental standards, they're so much more efficient here in the U.S. Rich, the last time I checked, the ozone level covered the whole planet. Okay, talk about that, Rich, and the standards that we have here in the United States. Okay, that we can control that we can't control overseas.
The United States has the highest regulatory regime in the world, whether it's child labor or environmental controls on the air, the water, the waste, even the cleanup, from exploration to reclamation and mine closure. And, what our commitment as member companies to the community to provide those high wage jobs. And nobody does it better. And we should be proud of that. And, we honestly believe that the United States investment regime for new projects like Katie talked about, the 400 projects and mines that are needed to meet the demand. This should be the country to do that. And unfortunately, there's some policies laying in the way of that. And part of our job here is to point that out and try to improve the amount of time it takes to put a new mine in the ground and build it up with the community engagement and community involvement. Right now, it takes 7 to 10 years to even get the initial permit. Our competitors can do it in 2 to 3 years. It takes another 6 or 7 years with and mounds and mounds of challenges and litigation in the courts once you even get that permit. So, you're a minimum of 10 years now for a lot of these projects.
How frustrating is it?
Chinese, Joe, the Chinese that sort of have cornered the market and many of these critical minerals started in their mining initiatives over 20 years ago. So we are desperately far behind. And now I think we have a bipartisan recognition that people's eyes are waking up to the fact that we need to get moving.
Yeah, I mean, how frustrating is it, okay, that we're willing to shut ourselves down, import the same products, okay, the same resources from overseas, under whatever standards are going on over there, depending upon where it's going on, okay? And we are very handicapped with our permitting situation over here. 7 to 10 years, we can't quickly react and compete. And when we talk about electric vehicle mandates, which the listeners who may not know what they are, we have issues, obviously, especially from a labor standpoint, of what's going on over in the Congo, and the fact that we're contributing to that by obviously purchasing those resources and those minerals through middlemen. Okay, but you look at that, and we cannot, like you said, 7 to 10 years to open up a to get a permit to mine these particular situations. Okay, where are we losing it here? In other words, we're not stopping. We still need the resources. When you have that conversation with somebody who's in your face, okay, and willing to allow individuals to bring these same products and resources over that we're shutting ourselves down on, what's the reaction?
Well, I think, there is growing understanding of what you just said, that this is getting ridiculous. We need these materials. It's essential for our economy and our competitiveness to continue, and for our workforce to continue to provide high-paid jobs in many rural parts of the country. So it is frustrating. I think what you've seen is a bit of an evolution On the more progressive side, they're willing to help fund some of the processing of those materials and some of the general engineering concepts related to, whether it's the IRA or some of the infrastructure spending that's been put out there. You're starting to see, money hit the ground for financial partnerships, but unfortunately, those partnerships, while helps with the capital flow and sends a signal to the market that these projects are viable, it does nothing to change the permitting regime, and that really is the final hill that we're willing to die on.
Yeah, and it's essential, or we're never. Oh, it's interesting you mentioned China. Look at the supply chain for our electric vehicles. Okay, when you talk about an electric vehicle mandate, okay, we're already, behind the 8 ball in our automobile industry. Okay, we're giving up. You're essentially giving up everything, like literally giving it up to China because they own the supply chain. And if you say that we're only going to be able to sell and purchase EV mandates, electric vehicles, and the internal combustion engine is out the door, who's making that? There's so many obvious things out there, and people, they need to just put 2 and 2 together. It's just so frustrating. But having said that, what type of minerals are we talking about? That are so important right now, Rich?
Well, Joe, we touched on it a little bit. It starts with the battery materials and the copper that goes to the electrification of everything. Rare earth elements are in the magnets that drive the motors. Copper's in there. Even silver, gold are in the solar panels and the wind turbines. So it's a tremendous broad swath of materials that are needed. But it also comes down to steel and aluminum and everything else that your listeners care about and work in those industries. Again, we're in the most metals and minerals intensive time in our history since World War II. And hot off the press, I'll let Katie address it, but we just got some new data from the U.S. Geological Service that once again reemphasizes our import reliance for a lot of these materials.
Katie?
Right. Import reliance, is just incredible. We are currently more than 50% reliant on imports of 49 different minerals. And of those 49, we're 100% import reliant on 15. And this is data from this morning. And where do most of those come from? China. So talk about a national security risk, right? From a place that certainly doesn't have the same kind of environmental and labor standards, right? And last year alone, China cut us off from 3 different minerals that are already on this list. So, they're willing to use their power against us. And we have opportunities here that we need to take advantage of.
So having said that, you mentioned obviously a little earlier that we have the capabilities here in the United States. Talk about that. That we don't, we're reliant. Okay, we're literally on a platter. Okay, taking our independence and our opportunities, handing them over. Okay, to, in a sense, you took China and individuals that are not our allies. Okay, to say the least. Do we have ample? Let's reiterate this. Talk about what minerals we have here in the United States, again, and what our own capabilities are. Do we need China?
So we have a lot of these minerals that Rich was already talking about, and we are finding more all the time. So the U.S. Geological Survey that Rich just mentioned is a federal government agency that is out there right now doing mapping across the United States and finding these critical minerals over and over again. Just in 1 year of using IRA funding for mapping, they found 800 different places in the United States that deserve more looking just for battery minerals. It's amazing. I think we will find that we have far more than we ever knew. Will we have economic supplies of everything? Maybe not. But we should be looking here first instead of relying on other countries.
What products, you mentioned turbines, okay? You talk about our renewables. Ironically, okay, we need these products, okay, for our renewable products, okay.
There's an old joke, not to make light of it, but you can't have your renewables without our minerals, and it's fundamentally true, Joe, to the point you're just making.
Well, yeah, and that's just reality. I mean, the discussion, how frustrating is that? You almost feel like you're in the twilight zone. And by the way, on this show, I don't get into rhetoric. We talk about facts. So I don't let anybody walk in and say, well, there's no issue with the environment. Nobody's listening to anybody, as soon as you have that conversation. When we think about these situations, Rich, do you feel like you're in the twilight zone when you're talking to somebody that wants to shut you down and talk about putting turbines up, across the country? And isn't the obvious, how are you going to do that without A, B, and C?
Well, that's exactly right. It's bringing that supply chain home for minerals, critical minerals, fundamental minerals, base minerals, precious metals. It's going to take all of it, and it's going to take a whole of government approach to make sure it can happen efficiently and in a timely manner to catch up with the Chinese and make this country competitive again.
Absolutely. We're going to take a quick break. We'll have more from the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey in just a minute.
My name is Eleanor Northaft. My husband was in the union, Local 282. And as I'm getting older, I'd like somebody to fight for me. So I called up Retiree First.
Hi.
And I got Brooke.
So nice to meet you.
I'm Brooke. I'm an advocate at Retiree First. I've been working with Eleanor for 3 years. She was one of my first calls. I helped her with transportation to her doctors, getting her glasses reimbursed.
Oh, they are pretty fancy.
I'm basically just answering any questions she has.
And I always have a lot of questions.
Not too many.
I have a friend there. I love it because I can depend on her to help me out in any situation.
Oh, I'm excited.
She always comes through for me.
Do you stream on a Roku, a Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app. Watch Action News live.
And the big story on Action News.
Plus special programming, breaking news, and severe weather updates.
Tremendous amounts of rain.
Always on, always the news team you trust. Watch 6ABC 24/7 on your streaming device. Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
Welcome back to the Labor and Energy Show here with JDoc and Krausey. We've got a great show. Rich-Nolan, President, CEO, National Mining Association. Katie-Sweeney, Executive Vice President and COO of the National Mining Association. We're having a great conversation, a common sense discussion, okay? When we talk about, being dependent, okay, on a lot of our critical minerals that we need to support our daily way of life, okay, but also the renewables coming in to the market, okay? It is, in my opinion, we've talked about it many times, like being in the twilight zone. And we're talking about educating people and say, Rich, how important should it be to work together on these initiatives, okay? Automatically, I can only imagine, what a daily experience would be when you're talking to somebody that just wants to shut you down, your entire industry. How much could we get done here if we were all working together?
Well, I think we get a tremendous amount done. I mean, the mining industry and miners in general are very patient people, but it's going to take time to turn the ship. An all government approach, from the support to the tax incentives, making sure that those flow to domestic projects and not overseas. Right now, the administration is out there trying to get minerals partnerships with the EU and with Japan and Indonesia and certain African nations that may not have the best interest of the United States in mind or the highest labor standards. So that's one piece of it. For when it comes to energy production, we believe it's an all of the above approach. Sure, we need renewables, but we also need to maintain the stable, reliable, affordable electricity that comes from our coal resources and our coal plants and our coal miners. So we need to continue to invest in all of it, to continue to make it cleaner over time, and to make sure we don't harm the public. We already have we've got. It's okay. It's about 17% increase in the price of electricity over the past year, and that's a lot for mom and pop. And in order to keep those rates down, we need to maintain affordable baseload power, and that includes power from coal, power from nuclear, and the other resources.
So the Biden administration came in saying that they were going to address our supply chain issues from the mine up. How have they done so far? I'll go to Katie.
I would not give them a passing grade, Joe. I think, as Rich said, there's some money going to processing to help, get those supply chains back, but that money isn't going to the mining projects themselves and getting them out of the ground. They have only approved 5 major mines since they came into office. So when you're looking at needing 400, 5 is just a drop in the bucket. And they have done very little to address the permitting delays. They focus more on permitting delays for renewable projects. But as Rich was saying, we're the front end of the renewable supply chain. They need to take some of that focus and put it on mining as well.
We've had Pete Stauber on the show previously, and Ryan Sistad of the organization Better in Our Backyard. Both highlighted some of the mine permit cancelizations that likely, they resulted in significant job issues or losses and mineral issues with, obviously, the ability to mine minerals. Okay, can you talk about some of those impacts in the project cancellations?
I would just want to say, Congressman Pete Stauber of Minnesota is one of the greatest champions of mining that we've seen probably in the last decade. So hats off to him for his efforts. I'll let Katie address some of the specific projects, but what happened to the mines in his district and what the administration did, basically canceling those projects, is just terrible.
Yeah. So Twin Metals in Minnesota, not only did they cancel their leases, the administration then withdrew that land so it could never be mined in the next 20 years. And that's just one example. They put 1 million acres off limits in Arizona of some very uranium-rich lands there. They continue to put more and more acreage of federal lands off limits when we're already experiencing about 50% of the federal lands across the United States are off limits to mining. So if we keep putting more of these federal lands, which is where many of these minerals are actually found, off limits, how can we ever, achieve independence when it comes to minerals?
And the losses, like we said, the losses of jobs and mineral supplies, significant in those situations. When you gauge, and so how helpful was the Inflation Reduction Act been? Okay, the intent was to boost domestic production and domestic business. Thoughts, Rich?
There is subsidies going in for battery plants and processing of minerals, but they're not going to the mines. They're not going to front-end engineering. They're not going to project development. And that's something that that was the intent of Congress, and it's basically being ignored.
Katie?
Yeah, no, I would agree. Absolutely. It's just been a shame. It, as Rich said, it's processing, which is also important. But unless you have that front end of the supply chain, we're losing that opportunity.
And looking at Pete Stauber's district, Joe, it's that's a traditional taconite iron ore, Iron Range, Northern Range of Minnesota. They understand how to do it right. They've been doing it for 100 years, and for them to block this project makes just no sense.
And we've seen a number of land withdrawals, national monument designations under the obviously the administration. How much of an issue was that to domestic mining industry, Rich?
Well, it just chills investment if you think that the exploration dollars that you've already put into the ground, the commitments you've made to labor workforce agreements in those regions, and you're all ready to go, and then all of a sudden, literally, the land, the carpet is pulled out from under you. And we're not talking about going into national parks or wilderness areas or anything like that. This is land that was set aside by the federal government for multiple use and the opportunity to explore for productive resources for the citizens of this country. And that focus and that organic designation is being eroded daily.
Katie?
Yeah, like I said, already over 50% of the federal lands are off limits. So, if you continue to add 100 million acres or 108 million acres here, a million acres there, a million acres there, we're never going to make any progress. This administration has already put, over 5 million additional acres off limits. It's just crazy.
And so if you talk about foreign sourcing agreements, if you listen to some of the auto manufacturers, they'll tell you they can't get the minerals they need for EV batteries in the U.S. right now. And even if they could, it's certainly not processed here. What's your response to that, Rich?
Well, my response to that is, there's no balance. I mean, obviously, no one wants to cut off the autos from the mineral supply. At the same time, several companies have said, "Hey, we don't need the subsidies. We're going to do this anyway. This is part of our business plan, and hey, we can afford it. So we don't need the subsidies. We're not, business as usual without the IRA. These cars would still have been built. If you recall, the commitments for EV manufacturing were out there long before these subsidies came forward. So now we're arguing about, the dollars that go, directly to those that want to buy these cars and where they're sourcing those minerals from. And I think the administration has put forward a bit of a sliding scale, which gives us some heartburn. But over time, those percentages are going to be cranked down based on the guidance that's proposed. The other loophole that they're trying to exploit is engagement on the subsidies with countries that have agreements, quasi free trade agreements in the mineral space. If they have those in place, even though those agreements technically are supposed to go before the Senate to be ratified, like all free trade agreements, they're going around the Congress. They're setting up these side deals, and they're making these foreign entities eligible for these subsidies, which is a very creative dodge from a made in America, minded America, buy American directive that Congress clearly laid out.
When I think about it, I'm a regular guy, okay, and I hear a lot of these things going on, and you hear us shutting ourselves down in so many ways. And even when you think about the permitting process, okay, 7 to 10 years. We can't react. We can't react and take over a lot of this business if we wanted to. If China wanted to do something to us to cripple us, it would create a permitting, situation where it would take us 10 years to compete. Okay, it's so frustrating. If I'm hearing you right, okay, we're shutting ourselves down. We're not making it possible for ourselves to get involved in a lot of these situations while we're while our own country is allowing avenues for competitors from overseas to come in and bring the same products. So the environmentalists are shutting us down. What are they doing? What are they doing? For imports coming in here, that are bringing the same products and resources. Am I off in this in this perception, Katie?
Not off in that perception at all. I mean, it's a very disingenuous approach by many of these environmental groups to say, oh, we still need these minerals. Let's import it from places that don't have the same kinds of protections and standards and workforce protections in place.
Well, and when I say that, I mean they're saying it under their pretense is about the environment. Okay, it's I hate to say it, ass backwards. If there ever was anything that I've ever seen, okay, and the American people, I believe, okay, are getting snowballed, no question about it. And as labor union members, we're losing so many jobs to individuals and standards overseas that are appalling. Having said that, let's segue a little bit. You talk about the White House. They put together an interagency working group on mining, allegedly to make recommendations that would support more domestic mining in the long run. Okay, I understand those recommendations came out last year. What did they say?
Well, the report was really a wolf in sheep's clothing. They said it was going to do all these things to incentivize domestic mining. It actually did the opposite. Katie was very involved in advising that group and can talk about some of the most onerous provisions that they recommended that they either take up on their own or direct Congress to legislate on.
Yeah, like some examples, Joe, are they want to convert and upend the way we currently do mining on federal lands, create a whole new process that will take decades to figure out how it will work and get through all the litigation. But the process that they want to use will just allow the government to say no whenever they feel like it. So not creating any regulatory certainty that could attract investment. And the other big recommendation was let's increase the fees and economic burdens on mining on these major projects where it already takes forever to get a return on the investment. You're not getting any, you're putting in hundreds of millions to billions of dollars in investment before you see a penny in return. But yeah, let's tax them some more.
What would you recommend? What would your group recommend?
We need regulatory certainty. So let's not change what's actually working, which is the mining law that governs how we mine on federal lands. And honestly, we need to fix the permitting system. That should be the focus, because we really don't. I mean, no matter what we do, if we don't fix the broken permitting system here, we are not going to achieve mineral independence.
Rich, before we segue into coal mining.
Katie's exactly right. It's all about permitting and judicial reform as well. I mean, once you get that permit, you've got to be able to move through the court system in a expedited manner. Right now, every major mining project is challenged in the courts. Every single one.
Yeah, and it's as frustrating as the day is long. And it's a number one. By the way, it's a number one priority for our organization. Okay, certainly we're crippling ourselves on a daily basis. I'm sure what's important about this show is talk about common sense and energy, but educating the public and these are things I'm sure you walk down the average street in the United States and you even mention permitting reform. Okay. Or the standards, the regulations. Americans have zero idea. We can't compete. We're crippling ourselves. Let's segue to coal mining. Obviously, your organization represents the full spectrum of the mining industry, which includes everything from gold, silver, copper, and lithium. But an important segment of that industry and resource here in the U.S. is coal. How is the coal industry faring these days?
Well, last year we had globally the largest consumption of coal in our history. Now, that is important to understand the value of coal and what's happening in more developed countries like Vietnam and Indonesia and India, where they continue to build out their economy and their manufacturing platforms with coal. Here in this country, there's been a concerted effort focused on by this administration and previous administrations to fence in the useful life of thermal coal plants here in the United States, and that's going to be a big problem. We still have over 16 states that rely on coal for their predominant source of power. Energy policy in this country is very regional, so it depends where you are and what the assets you have under your feet and above the ground make it most efficient and economical for you to provide power to your citizens, your manufacturers, and your workforce. So one size does not fit all. We saw this winter, last winter, the winter before that, cold snaps that unfortunately caused loss of life and certainly hardships for many parts of this country. We saw it again a few weeks back with the polar vortex that saw the coal demand and spikes in consumption of coal, especially in the Midwest and certain parts of the South, go off the charts. So it's really, really important to have those plants in place, to have that optionality, to make sure that you can use the fuel and get it to market on time. Nothing against the other sources, but in certain times of the year, the price of, say, gas spikes. So you need to have that optionality to choose what's best for your consumers, or there's difficulty getting it through the pipeline in low temperatures where the electricity base is challenged.
So we're going to spitfire because we only have a couple minutes.
Go for it.
Think about when there is a heat wave or when it's below zero, we got a big cold front. They want the plants working on overtime. Okay, what's going to happen when they shut them down? Because they're not coming back. Okay, you know what? I'll ask one question before we go. We talk about the energy transition. What does the coal industry think that shouldn't happen, and what's the responsible path forward? We're going to end on that question because we wish we had an entire another hour. Rich, if you would, and then Katie, take us home.
There's recognition, Joe, of that transition is underway. We just believe it's happening way too fast, where the rubber meets the road and the plants aren't there at the end of the day. There's going to be significant economic hardship. We're already seeing electricity inflation spike up. I think folks need to slow down and be careful what they're doing so we don't do long-term permanent damage to the electric grid and hurt people.
Absolutely. Katie, if you will.
Yeah, I think you said it very well, Joe. Once these plants are gone, they aren't going to come back. So we need to make much better decisions about how they're used and the remaining useful life of these plants. So we're not facing the crisis that Rich just described.
Listen, rich-nolan, katie-sweeney, we want to thank you so much for being on the program. Okay. Educating our general public, and we talk about common sense. Your members support our way of life. When we talk about the pathway forward, to me, it should only be about working together. Okay, we're writing checks that we can't cash. Okay, we're shutting ourselves down on the left. Literally speaking, we're putting our energy security and our energy in our efficiency. Okay, and our way of life in jeopardy with the decisions that are being made on a daily basis, because we're allowing one side to control the narrative. We want to thank you so much for being on this program. We can't wait to have you on again. Rich-Nolan, President, CEO, National Mining Association. Katie-Sweeney, Executive Vice President, COO, National Mining Association. Thanks so much for being on the program.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
It's our pleasure. We'll have more from the Labor and Energy Show in just a minute.
Welcome to Pond Lehocky, the largest workers' compensation law firm in Pennsylvania. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured and disabled workers obtain benefits, as well as some of the biggest settlements in the state. Even better, Pond Lehocky doesn't charge a dime until you win. If you've been injured at work, give Pond Lehocky a call.
The best way to describe Anthony, David, and Jan are that they're my brothers. I met Anthony at LA Fitness because I noticed that he had a Teamster's bag and his dad was a Teamster leader.
I'm a third generation son of labor. My grandmother worked in a factory. My mother and father were both Teamster members. I don't think there's a trade that I don't have a family member in.
What's so big for me coming from a union background is what affects one member affects the entire membership.
A lot of people can relate to the issues that individuals deal with. We pride ourselves on empathy.
The big value that's always instilled in you if you grow up in a union household is the importance of brotherhood. People that lean on each other, that rely on each other.
When we were building this business, having that background and knowing what matters most to the union members is really what we use to drive and build out Retiree First.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
And back here on the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey. Wow, JDoc, great conversation today. One of those programs that had certainly had enough time to go into, I think you had even mentioned wishing you had another hour. Good conversation. What we're here for, to provide information to educate the public.
Well, also, in a sense, to meet, the faces, who are and the people that are on the front lines. Okay, and salt of the earth, people who care about, our way of life. Okay, also the environment. Okay, representing individuals, like we talked about there. At the end. The fact of the matter is that whenever there's obviously a cold front or a heat wave, they want our so our grid is not at risk. They want our coal plants. They want all of our energy plants on overtime. Okay, 24/7 around the clock. What are we doing? Okay, working together to make sure that the solutions. As we move forward in energy and our environment, okay, and our workforce are working together in unison for our country and the world. And right now, Joe, you heard Rich and Katie talk about, we talk about permitting reform, but we're so reliant and dependent on overseas, organizations and companies and countries to provide us with resources we have here in the United States, and they're not doing it as well as we're doing it, not as efficiently, not as energy efficient. Obviously workforce and labor, okay? Our labor movement, you watch what's going on in the Congo, and you and I have had this conversation across the board. It is incredibly frustrating, but the good people that we're talking to on a daily basis, and the education they're providing for our listeners, I have a full confidence that we are eventually going to change the narrative. And to me, the narrative is working together. It's not a union issue. It's not a political issue. It's a human issue.
That's going to do it for this edition of the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey. Again, special thanks to Rich-Nolan and Katie-Sweeney for being our guest today for the full hour. If you miss any of today's show, or as many people do, go back and download the podcast of the broadcast today on Apple or Spotify. Simply search the Labor and Energy Show. On behalf of my partner, JDoc, on behalf of Kateri, who produced the show today, I'm Joe Kraus. See you next time, everybody.